There are places in the woods where the trees grow too close and the silence feels heavy, like the land itself is holding its breath. In the forgotten corners of Appalachia, folks know better than to wander too far from the firelight, not just because of bears or bobcats, but because of the watchers, the ones who stay just out of sight, just out of reach, until they're not. In tonight's video, you're going to hear 3 true accounts from people who ventured too deep, stayed too long, or listened too closely, and they came back changed. Stories of pale things that mimic our footsteps, of ancient watchers who don't blink, and of songs whispered through moss-choked hollows. These aren't ghost stories. These are warnings. Welcome to the other side. My name is John, and let's just jump into it. Our first story is titled, The Ones That Watch. I grew up in a tiny town in West Virginia, nestled deep in the Appalachian Mountains. My family has lived there for generations, long enough to have our own stories about things that lurk beyond the tree line. I never believed any of it. That is, until last summer. My cousin Eli and I had a tradition. Every June, we'd spend a week camping near an old abandoned logging road deep in the woods. It was isolated, miles from any other person, and exactly the kind of place 2 idiots like us loved. The first few nights were uneventful. We fished, told ghost stories, and stayed up too late drinking cheap beer by the firelight. But then, on the 4th night, something changed. We were lying in our tent half asleep when we heard it. Soft, deliberate footsteps circling our campsite. Eli sat up first. "Did you hear that?" I nodded, my heart hammering. We held our breath, listening. A twig snapped. Something was outside the tent. It's probably a deer," I whispered. "Then why ain't it running?" he whispered back. The steps, they were slow, measured, like something was watching us, wanting to see our reaction. I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped the tent. The second it clicked on, the noises stopped. The beam cut through the trees, illuminating nothing but the thick underbrush and the mist rolling off the ground. Hello? I called out. Silence. We didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, we found something that made my stomach drop. Around the campsite, just outside the ring of firelight, were footprints. Bare, human footprints. They were wrong, though. The toes, they were too long. The arch was high. It was weird. It was like whatever made it wasn't really meant to walk upright. We should have packed up and left then, but we didn't. That night, we built the fire higher than usual, keeping our backs to it as we watched the woods. It was around midnight when we finally saw them. At first, it was just movement, shifting shadows between the trees. Then, one step forward. It was tall, gaunt. Its skin was as pale as the underbelly of a fish. Stringy, matted hair hung over a face that was almost human, but it was wrong. Its eyes were too deep and wide, and they reflected the firelight like an animal's. Another appeared, then another. Eli later on told me they looked like aliens to him. Eli grabbed my arm and he said, "We need to go now." We moved slowly, terrified that any sudden movement would send them charging. The moment we made it inside the truck, Eli floored it, spraying gravel as we tore down the dirt road. In a rearview mirror, I saw them step into the firelight. They didn't chase us. They just watched. We haven't been back since, but sometimes, when I'm outside at night, I get the feeling that someone's watching me. I tell myself it's nothing. But then I remember their faces, and I wondered if they ever really stopped. Story 2. Not Bigfoot. People disappear in the Smoky Mountains all the time. Park rangers blame bears, bad weather, poor planning. But my buddy Connor has a different theory. Bigfoot. And I'm starting to agree. We've been obsessed with Bigfoot since we were kids. Watching grainy footage and listening to stories from old-timers who swore they had seen something. Last fall, we finally decided to do our own investigation. We headed deep into the Tennessee wildlands to find proof. We packed everything. Trail cams, night vision goggles, even a parabolic microphone to pick up sounds in the dark. Our plan was simple. Hike out past marked trails, set up camp, and wait. The first 2 days were uneventful. We found some broken branches, a few weird tracks, but nothing concrete to say it was Sasquatch. Then on the third night, we heard it. A low, guttural howl echoed through the trees. Not a coyote, not a wolf. Something that was different. Connor grabbed his recorder and started recording. "That's gotta be it, man. That's gotta be Bigfoot," he said with excitement. I wasn't so sure. It didn't sound like any calls we studied. It sounded almost human. Like someone was out there making the sound to scare us. Still, we pressed on. The next night, we hiked farther up the ridge, setting up our cameras near a clearing where we found some strange markings on a tree. And that's when we saw them. At first it was just one, standing at the edge. It was hunched. Its arms were too long, almost as if its fingers drug against the dirt. Then we saw another. They weren't Bigfoot. Their skin was grayish, stretched too tight over bones that jutted at sharp angles. Their faces were sunken and their eyes were black like wet stones. They moved in unnatural ways. Too fast when they wanted to be, too still when they didn't move. Connor raised his rifle and yelled at them, "Stay back!" The closest one tilted its head like it was listening. Then without a sound, it disappeared back into the trees. The others followed and they melted back into the darkness. For a long moment, we just stood there, breathing hard, and then from all around us, we heard them. Clicking sounds, low, chittering laughs, the snap of twigs. It was closer now than it was before. They were surrounding us. We didn't waste time packing up. We grabbed our gear and ran, and I don't know how long we sprinted through the woods, but we only stopped when we saw the glow of Connor's headlights in the distance because he was slamming the unlock button on his key fob. When we finally got inside and locked the doors, Connor turned to me pale in the face. "That wasn't Bigfoot, man. I don't know what that was." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Whatever we found in the woods, it was something older. Something that had been watching us long before we ever saw it. And worst of all, it let us go. So what did it want? Story number 3. The Singing Hollow. I was raised in a forgotten corner of eastern Kentucky. The kind of place with more ghost stories than streetlights. Folks out here keep their heads down and their mouths shut, especially when it comes to what lives in the woods. My granddad used to say the mountains had voices, and if you listen too long, you might start singing back. I never paid it much mind because that never made sense to me. I thought that was just an old-timer saying stuff. Last October, my friend Mason and I decided to do a weekend hike into a place the locals call Sinking Holler. It's an old strip of forest nestled between two ridges, untouched and overgrown, with no marked trails leading in or out. You have to know exactly where it is to even find it. Mason's the kind of guy who loves creepy stuff, reads all the Reddit threads, watches all the documentaries. He's heard whispers of singing holler before on some obscure podcast, and stories about voices at night, lights that move between the trees, people going in and not coming out, and he wanted to find out if any of that was true. I should have said no. We set out early Saturday morning. It took us the better part of a day to reach the holler. The deeper we went, the quieter everything got. There's no birds, there's no bugs, just the sound of our boots on dry leaves. At dusk, we set up a camp in a small clearing, choked in moss and twisted roots. As the fire crackled, Mason pulled out his recorder and he said, half joking, "Time to catch some Appalachian demons." We didn't catch anything that night. Just some weird echoes, like something was mimicking our voice just a second too late. We chalked it up to the shape of the valley. The next night, though, that was different. I'll never forget what happened. Around midnight, I woke up to the sound of singing. It was soft, female, the kind of lullaby you'd hear in an old-timey music box. The melody rose and fell, drifting through the trees like a fog. I thought, maybe, just maybe I was dreaming. But then Mason sat up, eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" he said. I nodded. My throat was dry. I guess we had to figure out where it's coming from. We both got out of the tent, flashlights in hand, and the singing stopped the second we unzipped the flap. Just completely cut off, like somebody hit pause. Then, just beyond the light of our flashlights, we heard laughter. Not the kind that makes you feel warm, like you're in on a joke. The kind that sounds wet and broken, like somebody was trying to remember what laughing was supposed to sound like. Mason whispered, "We gotta leave. I don't like this." No shit. When we turned, the trail we hiked on wasn't there. I swear to God, hand on the Bible, it was replaced by a thicket of trees that we hadn't seen there before. Old growth trees, gnarled, covered in moss, like they've been growing for hundreds, if not thousands, of years. And that's when we saw her, standing just past the firelight's edge, barefoot, pale. Her hair hung like a veil over her face, and she wore a dress that looked like it belonged in a Civil War reenactment, torn and stained like the dirt she crawled out of. And she was humming the same lullaby that woke us up. I couldn't move. Mason started praying under his breath, which only made her tilt her head, curious, like a crow watching a shiny thing. Then, more of them stepped out. Men, women, children. They were all wearing clothes from another time, all barefoot and all wrong. Their faces were stretched, and they were grinning like the Joker. Like the grin didn't fit their face or their skin, and every single one of them was humming the same tune. Over and over and over. We didn't wait. We didn't even grab our bags. We just ran. We left the fire behind us, and the sound of the humming got louder as we ran. We ran until dawn, when we finally found the road and found the truck. We got in, locked the doors, and we didn't say a word the whole ride home. Luckily, the only thing we didn't leave behind was Mason's recorder. Later, I checked the recordings. Most of it was static. But right around midnight, just before we woke up, there was something. A voice, clear as day, as if they knew where the recorder was, said,
"Stay a while. We've missed the music."
We haven't spoken about that night since. Mason deleted the audio and burned that recorder. He said some things aren't worth investigating and he will never listen to another spooky podcast or watch another horror movie again. But sometimes, when I'm going to sleep, I hear that song again. Soft, humming in the back of my mind. And I wonder if we ever really left that holler, or if part of us stayed behind and we're still humming. Ladies and gentlemen, not everything that watches us from the shadows means us harm. But sometimes it does. And sometimes it just waits. Waits to be seen. Waits to be remembered. Waits to be believed. If you've ever felt it, that prickling on the back of your neck when you're alone in the woods, or the feeling of eyes in the dark when nobody's there, just know you're not crazy. And you're not alone. You might have just wandered too close to the edge. Thank you for watching or listening if you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts to the other side. If you've got a story like this, something that watched you, drop it in the comments or shoot me an email. I try to read them all, and who knows, yours might be the next tale we tell. I apologize on getting this video out late. I had a bunch of stuff come up with work over the past couple weeks, and I'm finally getting this rolling again. So, send in your stories. Your story might be next. Until next time, stay in the light, and if you can't, sure as hell don't look back.